from access to assurance. So let's first understand what does access means. So as a user, when you try to access an application or resource, it means you are trying to access the resource. The access can be form of data as well. And when we say from access to assurance, what we are trying to accomplish is, in the keynote, you might have heard a lot of talks about compliances being coming up in different parts of the world, starting from GDPR, ISO, DPDP Act, and how they are impacting how we access our data and how we can secure our data. So this assurance will make sure that our access will get some assurance that, okay, your data can't be stolen, your data won't be available publicly on sale, and you can actually protect your data. So in this particular session, we'll talk about different global frameworks which have been established across different regions to protect personal user information, like in European region, or say in US region, or in India also. There's a recently started regulation called DPDP Act, and then we'll understand how IAMS plays a critical role in securing that access and securing your data. Because what happens, there are a lot of tools in the market, there's a lot of training needs to be done. So IAM is just one of the piece which helps you fulfilling all of these compliances, and we'll talk about that one by one. So let me just give you a quick introduction. I think MC already has done that. I'm currently working in identity and access management space from past 11 years, and I'm looking at product management side, our product roadmap, and that's how I know what are the different compliances are out there in the world and how they are impacting our personal user rights and information. So now let's take a look at some global data privacy compliance frameworks. First that we'll talk about is GDPR. The full form is General Data Protection Regulation. It was established in 2016 by European Union. And what does this say is, any individual personal information needs to have a process of collection, needs to have some consent in place, and each individual user needs to have the rights if they want to share the data publicly or not. So this particular compliance is making sure that we are not just collecting the user data, because in today's world, as all of you are signing up for so many services which are on cloud, your data is almost everywhere on internet. So we have to ensure that that data is being used judiciously. It's not like I sign up on a service and they sell my data to some other service for their own benefit or for advertisement. So that's why this kind of compliance framework has been started in Europe. And in Europe, this is a global framework that they started in 2018. We have a similar compliance called CCPA, started in California also, to protect consumer rights. So what happened, as a consumer, we sign up for a lot of services these days. We are buying our clothes online, we are ordering our groceries online, everything is happening online, and due to which we sign up on a lot of services. And as we sign up on a lot of services, there's a huge chance that people use your data, your personal data, mobile number, and share it across different channels. So what happens, California also established a similar law, states that each individual user has a right to access, right to understand how their data will be used, if they want to share, consent for their users. So all these practices have been established in US also through this particular framework for individual consumers who are using these different online services. Now let's take a look at the third global compliance, which is called PCI DSS. This is a payment card data security standard. This has been established in 2004. It is before GDPR and CCPA. And what does this say is, as we are purchasing a lot of things online these days, we save our card information as well. And as we save our card information also online, what happens, there's chance that that card information can get stolen by any hacker or someone. And if that happens, you know that banks from your money can get out very easily. And all of us know that money is a very hardened thing, which everyone does at day-to-day job. They do their jobs, they earn salaries, and if something like this happens, it impacts individuals a lot. So what this framework says is any cardholder information that you are storing online, you have to secure it, protect the data in a manner that it should not be stolen. And this initiative was started by American payment companies, but later on what happened, this became a global standard, and in today's world, across the globe, all different online services, be it India, Canada, US, Australia, everywhere, any company says that you can purchase anything from me and say you are going to save your card information on their service or online portal, they have to ensure their PCI DSS is compliant so that user can be assured, okay, my card data won't be stolen and no one can take that data up. So that's why this is a very important framework that came into picture. Now let's understand the fourth, compliance. This is also on the same lines of protecting user personal information as well as user rights, and it came from the similar standards that GDPR and CCPA was formed in India. It was initiated in 2022, but still by Indian government, this is not passed as a law yet. It is under some sort of review, but the public draft is already available, and many people in India, different IT companies, different organizations who are dealing with online services are already aware that DPDP is a kind of an act which is coming and which will be soon passed. So people are preparing themselves that, okay, if we are also have our products online, we have our cloud services, then we need to ensure that we follow all the guidelines in order to how we collect data, how we process data, or how we share data across any medium. So these are the data privacy compliance. Let's understand. Okay. Usually what happens as an organization or company, when any organization starts collecting data from the user, there are some common mistakes that they do. One of them is collecting too much data, which is not needed for them, and there's no transparency. What are their collection policies? Are they going to use that data to share with any services or not? So these are couple of these issues that we need to change and adopt, that we need to have a public policy published on our website, that how are we going to collect your data, how are we going to process your data. Another issue is fail to take consent from users. So these days you guys must be browsing a lot of websites, and what happens, you don't know if you are signing up on any platform, and you do login with Google, login with Facebook. Through that account, the new application can take a lot of your existing saved data, and you might not know that without consent, they can also access that data to for their own benefit. So what we need to do as part of this compliance framework is right to consent. Every individual user has a right that they want to give consent to use their data or not. They can also deny that, okay, I don't want you to use my data, or maybe a particular set of data. So taking consent is also another very important aspect. Another is poor data security. So what happens, as a lot of our day-to-day services are going online, a lot of data is being stored on cloud and in databases. But what companies are not paying attention to is how we are storing that data. Are we encrypting that data, or are we storing that in a plain text format? How are they transmitting that data from one service to another? Are they doing the encryption, all of that? So those data protection practices are not that great, and people need to adopt a lot of good practices to ensure that data remains safe. As we know, a lot of these services are just behind passwords, which are very common passwords, and people can easily hack into your common password these days. So protecting your data behind a multi-factor authentication is also getting very important. Um, Last point is inadequate retention policies. So what happened? Sometimes if you say sign up on any service, they might store your data, but after a point, suppose you unsubscribe to that service or platform. So ideally, what that organization or company needs to do is they should remove their data, or you should have the right to say that please delete my data. But what really happens is companies end up storing the unnecessary data sometimes, even after you unsubscribe, which they don't need. Similar such things can also happen with employees. When any employee leaves an organization, ideally all of his information should be removed, all of his access should be removed. And many times organization teams forgot to do that, and people have unnecessary access which they should not have, due to which anything can happen, because as we heard about insider threats in key session, when any employee leaves the job, he can do anything which is not right, and he can also sell company data, which we saw in few examples in earlier sessions also. So now let's take a look at, because these are the common mistakes companies are doing, are the common key requirements which have been established within these compliance frameworks. So these compliance framework, GDPR, CPA, DPDP, all of them have established practices which can help to protect the user information rights and make sure we can use that in a proper manner. So as you can see, consent is one important guideline that this compliance framework has created, which clearly says individuals must give clear and explicit consent for the collection, processing, and sharing of their personal data. Every individual has right that they should be aware about how any particular service or organization is using their data. Second example is right to access and right to erasure. So even though suppose you have shared your personal information, you sign up on a website, but you still should have right to access that information, update that information, and as well as delete that information. You should not go to a company and say, hey, please delete my account, and then they are not responding. There should be a provision that you should be able to delete the account which you have created. So all of these rights are very necessary. As you can see, an image here, this is one example where what happens, there's a new application which tries to access a user's Google data. So suppose I have an account with Google, and then I sign up on a new service, which is say login with Google. So that particular service can use my existing data saved on Google. But this is how a consent form looks like, that you need to take consent from user that, hey, I'm going to use this all information from your existing account. Do you allow me or not? And if user doesn't want to give consent to all of this, actually the service or application should be allowed to use that. And this is how a consent form looks like. Okay. Now let's look at a couple of more key requirements here. Another is transparency. So in transparency and disclosure, it's important that any organization should also declare that if they are going to use any information from the consumer, what are they going to do with that information? Are they going to use that for their own service only, or they are going to sell that to another organization and earn some money? Because this is a very common thing happening these days. People are selling data which is online. So you must have getting calls also. You sign up on a platform and you get calls from 10 different platforms that, okay, do you want this service? Because your data is being surrounded over the internet through this data selling practice. The transparency and disclosure is very important. How your data is being collected, shared, and used. And the last one is data security and protection, because we looked this one as one of the problems in storing data when different organizations deal with a lot of data processing. So as you can see, organizations need to implement appropriate measures so that personal data should not be have access to a wrong person. Only people who need access to data should be able to access that. In this one also, you can see an image which shows you an example that a particular application is asking that, okay, I'm going to use this particular information, download calendar and your contacts. So it is informing user, giving that transparency that, okay, I'm going to use this data from your existing Google account. Please continue. Do you want to authorize this or not? And based on the user's authorization only, will decide that if we want to give access or not. Okay. These are few examples that I've collected along these different regulations that different companies, and few of them are very popular companies. You might have heard about these brands. H&M is the clothing retail brands many of you might be using in India. Sephora is a makeup retail brand, and Adobe. All of these are new age companies, and because of their data dealing practices, how they were storing consumers' data, they have faced these kind of penalties because they were not able to meet the compliance needs. So let's take a look at them one by one. First one is for H&M, which violates the GDPR law. And what happens? They used to have employee records, but they used to keep additional employee records which were not needed, like employee family information, employee health and illness information, which was not needed by H&M to keep a record of. So what happened? German DPAs figured that out, that they are storing unnecessary employee data which should not be stored, and they were issued a fine of 35.3 million euros. And that's how big companies got fines. And it is very important that we follow these guidelines established in these compliance framework to make sure we are dealing with the data in the right way. The second example is which happened with Sephora, where what happened, without taking any consent from consumers, as a lot of consumers are signing up, buying, purchasing from their products, they sell that data to another organization, which was not known. Consumers don't know that they were selling consumers' data to other services and gaining extra money in return. So that's why California attorney fined them around $1.2 million for that. And these are just one specific example up here. Many such examples which have happened, including Google, Meta, a lot of big brands across the world who have to dealt with these fines. And that's how we are improving our compliance culture, our data security culture, because people have to deal with fines. Then they get a kickback that, okay, I have to start taking this seriously. Third example is for PCI. So what happens? Adobe has a lot of cloud services. Many of you might know NVIDIA is also Adobe's one of the services. So Adobe's people save their card information, like credit card information is being saved in Adobe's cloud services. So what happens? Because their data security practices were not great, hackers get into their complete database record. They were able to take login information and take cardholders' data, because of which a lot of damage has done and a lot of states on company, and that's why Adobe has to pay $1 million settlement for PCI DSS compliance, because compliance is for breaching your cardholder data only. That's the case that Adobe has to face, and that's why nowadays companies are taking this more seriously. Anyone who needs to take in purchases, anyone who wants that I should save my consumer's card for a subscription model, for a monthly subscription, or for any service, they need to ensure that they are compliant with PCI. Now let's just understand, we look at a lot of problems, how organizations are dealing with data, what are these compliance frameworks that came into picture are saying, and now let's look at what IAM plays a role in making sure that companies can secure data in a better manner for their consumers and gain that customer trust. Because what is the major damage here is, if any consumer data gets through all these scenarios, they lost reputation, which is very important. If you lost customer trust and reputation, the customer won't come back to you. The customer will go and say that, okay, don't trust this brand anymore. I will go and purchase from any other brand. So that's why it is getting very important for organizations to say that, okay, we will come up with better data security practices so that we can protect and access your data in a better manner. And in this whole picture, IAM plays one crucial role. So let's just understand what IAM does here. I've listed a few key features within the IAM which takes care of this. One of them is access control. In access control also, there are two types. One is role-based access control and another is attribute-based access control. We'll talk about all of this one by one. Another is least privilege access. So in a lot of the earlier sessions also, we must have heard about this keyword, that zero trust or least privilege access is very important to ensure that right person has a right amount of access and he doesn't have any unauthorized or additional access. Third one is multi-factor authentication, that we'll also talk about. Fourth is audit trails and login. So from the compliance perspective, this is very important to showcase transparency, to showcase how are your data tracking practices and to prove to any compliance or auditor that how I am tracking data and how things are going. And this is a good way to show those audits and reports. Last one is provisioning and deprovisioning. So now just let's talk about all of these features about IAM which can help you achieve the different compliance guidelines initiated by GDPR, CCPA, DD, DPDP or PCI. Okay. Let's just understand what is role-based access control. So what happens, anyone who is already working in any company, we understand that every company has different departments. All of you must have different roles assigned. There's a accounting department, marketing, engineering, all of those departments. So those become our roles in the organization. And what happens, what different data acts should be defined based on our role. So as you can see in this image, in any hospital scenario, maybe a medical company, a role doctor has is very different from a role nurse has, and different role that an administrator has. So all of them should have different set of access to the data, and that's how we should define role-based access control for our organizations also, that through IAM system you can define that particular user has this and this user should only access limited set of amount necessary for his role. If my role doesn't allow me to have access to any information, I should not have that access. And that's how role-based access control plays its roles in supporting these compliance framework. So there is a concept called data minimization in GDPR, CCPA, a lot of frameworks. Role-based access control can support that. And these are few examples like data minimization principle. Only minimum amount of data required should be accessed by user. And similarly, under PCI also, there is some limits that cardholder data should not be accessible to anyone who is not authorized. And using role-based access control can ensure that all take place through the IAM product and tool. Another topic is least privilege access. So, what does this mean? Usually what happens, suppose in organization there are two departments, one is accounting, one is HR. HR is requesting an employee information, but should they have the accounting information of the employee also? Yes or no? No. So that's how least privilege comes in. Even if you need access to something, you can see a dialogue going on here. It's not necessary the person who will give access give you the full access. He needs to identify what's the role of the person and what level of access that person needs. And based on the level of privilege that user needs, you only give him access. HR should not have access to accounting data, and accounting should not have access to data which is not required by them and only required by HR team. And that's how you define your least privilege access, where unnecessary data shouldn't be shared with any particular user, resource or role. Let's look at this is also one of the features which supports the data minimization principle in our compliance framework. So you can see that in PCI also and in GDPR also, which mandates that how personal data should be protected. This particular feature helps you that if you have a defined process, you'll have proper data protection in place. And the important feature is multi-factor authentication. So as we were talking about, one of the problem is data security, and a lot of data get leaked because what happens, we are used to logging into most of our applications using passwords, and our common habit is that we use some passwords which we use across 5 different applications. We might not remember that password, so we also write down that password on a piece of paper somewhere, or sometimes we also use a combination like password with zero and dot, or put in your date of birth in the password. So as you know, in today's world, it is so easy to track any user information that these kind of passwords can be easily leaked and anyone can hack into your system. Right? There is a concept called multi-factor authentication which comes into play and ensures that not just you are relying on password for your protecting your data information, but you can also rely on additional authentication mechanism. That could be biometric, it could be your face fingerprint, that could be your TOTP mobile applications like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or that could be your OTP or SMS, email, hard token. There are a lot of multi-factor authentication options available these days. If we look at how it supports compliance, it just adds an additional layer on top of password so that you don't have to just rely on password for your data protection, and your data can be secured by the additional authentication factor also. And these days, with coming times, new ways of authentication are coming, which can ensure people can't hack into your system very easily. There is biometric, there is WebAuthn. You can read about all of these topics, and you'll find a lot of information around kind of different authentication methods are coming up. There's also a mention of how this feature is also supporting our compliance. In GDPR Article 32 also, it's mentioned that you need to have an extra layer of security, and the different organizations can't rely on just password-based login systems. You need to have additional level of authentication mechanism. Similarly, PCI also mandates that anyone in the organization who has access to the cardholder data should have a way to authenticate in a better manner and not just using password. This saves a lot of unauthorized access and makes sure that critical financial data is being leaked very easily. Yeah. Fourth is audit trails and logging. I would say this is a very basic feature which is not specific to IAM, but any product or application or cloud service you build, you should have an auditing system and you should have a reporting system. But how it becomes very important for any security product or say a IAM product is you need to audit what's the user activity happening, what role change is happening, what data they are accessing, so that at the time of any data breach, this helps a lot to identify and point out that this particular issue happened, this particular activity might have gone wrong, particular access of user might have gone wrong. This helps in troubleshooting those scenarios a lot. When actually something bad happens, any kind of data breach happens. Because our auditing helps us keep a track of the activity. In the image also, you can see through IAM product, through PAM product, there's a possibility that you can do session recording of the user activity. You can also track each and every activity. You can send those logs to a SIM tool. So in the previous session only, there's a lot of discussion about ITDR. So for doing that threat detection, first we need to audit a lot of data. Until we do a lot of auditing and send it to right set of SIM and SOAR tools, those detection tools can't identify that, okay, these are the threats I have in my organization and I need to fix them. It could be access related threats, it could be data related threats, any threats. these are few examples. In GDPR, there's something called accountability requirements, which mandates that everything should be audited in an organization who is dealing with user data or consumer data. And there is also a concept of data protection by design in GDPR, which says that auditing and logging is very necessary for any organization. And the CCPA, where, it's also important to showcase how you are accessing personal data. So auditing, and when you create reports out of those auditing, helps you do that. This is our last feature in IAM, user provisioning, deprovisioning. So what does this concept means is, suppose in any organization, when an employee joins, usually what happens, we have a manual way of creating the account. HR will create an account, then he will give him access to 10 different applications manually. But what happens when an employee leaves, we follow the same manual process. And as organizations are getting big, in between joining and offboarding, there are role changes happening, promotion happening, demotion happening, a lot of things happening. Many times, due to human error, we can forget to remove any access of a user, maybe left a company. We talked about this example earlier also, and that leads to a lot of unauthorized access. Sometimes that leads to a lot of data breaches, which happens with organization in the past, and then they have to deal with, okay, I forgot to do this. So that's why we have something called user provisioning, deprovisioning, which is an automated workflow in identity and access management, which ensures that you don't have to manually create all of this. The complete workflow can be automated. You just onboard the user once and it will be automatically provisioned to 10 different applications. Based on your role, he'll get the right amount of access. Once you deprovision the user, you just give one signal that I want to delete the user from place. It could be your original source of directory, maybe your HR system or Google Office 365. But then the rest of the access will be taken care automatically through the system, which will ensure that no trace of user remains if user has left the organization, or if a role change happen, a user is transitioning from a one type of a role to another type of role. Then also sometimes we need to change access, and that change access should identify that, okay, this set of access needs to be removed and this set of access should be added. So all of them can be tackled the automated user provisioning lifecycle management. This requirement supports all the compliance mechanisms, and these are few examples of how provisioning and deprovisioning work. So guys, let's just look at, we've done most of the IAM features. The key takeaways for this session, as we understand, IAM plays a critical role in making sure your data stays protection, and that's how IAM takes you from access to assurance, that okay, you can be assured that your data will be in access control and will stay in the right hands. So IAM plays a crucial role in making sure that your data is accessed by right resources, right time, and right amount of authorization is given. Then these are the features which are very important for data privacy compliance, and any organization who want to comply with these different frameworks can have IAM in place. And there are other tools also, because IAM is not just the tool. Before that, basic thing that they need to have is our last point, which is maintaining a training program, maintaining different guidelines for any workforce, so that you can follow basic practices, which is called creating a security culture in any organization. Because before using any tools, you need to educate your employees how to deal with data, how to deal with all of these access that you have on a day-to-day basis based on the role that they have in the organization. Any questions there?
Loại một cái như thế không thì không lại thì đó lấy đi khẩu với cái tiếp tin thì người có cái bao cái hình trạng đấy thì ai được nó in depth you know you kind of have a very shady law in terms of to join the kidnap. Many people, he highlighted all that he wanted ideas. Some years of community, and then the idea had. But on the other hand, Singapore has a very qualified laws in high, they did it to be done, and they destroy the extent. But from what I saw plans, he is on it's having a day that once a day the family to go from the end watch to a deep what are the things of time to you look for.
See, if you are an Indian company and you want to have access to data from any other company, in these compliances also there is something called data residency. So what data residency says is, if I want to do business in Europe, if I want to do business in US, all of my consumer data should stay in that particular region itself. So like you mentioned, Singapore also has a data compliance, right? That's what you are saying. And if any Indian company, or not just Indian company, but globally, any company wants to do business in Singapore, then that compliance must have or might have a mandate that, okay, all of that data needs to reside within my particular region. So that's how what AWS and Azure are doing is they are coming up with different data centers and more regions in parts of the world. So in the keynote also we listen to that usually we have seen Azure and AWS services earlier just in US only, then Europe also. But now they are coming up with data centers in India, committed Southeast Asian countries like Singapore, and that's how we'll be able to get better at getting the data compliances that, okay, all of the data of that particular region needs to stay within that particular region. Okay, I think you also have a question.
So, as a part of paying, websites, a lot of things are about needing to be diversity. How I think of that, a man that described is that they are on the God, and that into all the
Correct.
he got over and
Correct.
Lord that I knew.
Yeah.
Always alignment I so I see is taking this in a little mind.
Okay. So as you took example of Aadhaar, I would give one example around digital identities. As we know, now we are transitioning from traditional source like Google or say My Identities and look from new type of identities. It could be DigiLocker, it could be any type of digital identity in any part of the world. So now the way IAM systems would integrate is that they would also have authentication through digital authentication also. That's one connection. Slowly in the identity and access management also, there is an area of customer identity and access management which is specifically focusing on consumers. And when it comes to consumers, digital identity will have a major role to play. And next topic you mentioned is about AI, right? So in today, the different features we discussed didn't cover. In IAM also, there is something called adaptive authentication on top of multi-factor authentication, which is based on a lot of different behavioral parameters like your location, time of access, device, IP. And how IAM systems are leveraging AI here is, if you guys are doing a lot of payment transactions, you might see that slowly those are getting smarter, that people are able to detect that if you are doing an unnecessarily high payment transaction, they suddenly block you or give you a call that, okay, are you the right person who is doing that? So all of that type of detection can be done through adaptive authentication, and AI has a major role play in that. Okay, thanks guys. I think we are done with the question answers. Is the QR code. If you feel to have any feedback, please scan this QR code and share the feedback.